And here we find an Intune deployment, resting quietly in its habitat. Yet one subtle imbalance can invite predators. Look closely. Weak conditional access, missing baselines, idle admin privileges, unmanaged BYOD, reckless rings, 5 misconfigurations that expose the whole ecosystem. You'll see how attackers slip through identity gaps, not just software flaws, and how to shut those paths fast. Today's route: what's dangerous, why it fails, the precise fix in Intune Admin Center, and with Graph, PowerShell, and a brief field audit. Stay with it. A single adjustment can prevent a fleeting moment from becoming a costly breach. The threat landscape shaping, Intune risk, context for the 5. Why it matters now. Look closely here. The modern predator hunts identities first. It stalks weak sign-ins, inattentive OAuth apps, and generous API permissions. Authentication alone is not shelter if the gate stands ajar, even for a moment. Observe the pattern seen in recent high-profile intrusions. A legacy account with a soft password is nudged by password spraying. Tokens are captured. Then, with remarkable precision, an OAuth application is granted expansive scopes, turning a single lapse into broad access. Mailboxes open. Files follow. A truly unsettling disturbance in the habitat. In this climate, misconfigurations do not merely add risk, they magnify it. They widen trails, speed the hunt, and muffle alarms. Upset this balance and chaos spreads swiftly. Intune is not the fortress. It is the field instrument that measures health, applies posture, and signals the identity gate when a device is trustworthy. Zero trust governs the weather here. Never trust, always verify. But only if the controls move together like a flock. The thing most people miss is the interlocking nature of cloud controls. Device compliance, conditional access, and privileged access cannot roam alone. A compliant device signal without strong access policy is a timid bird. Conditional access without baselines trusts a silhouette rather than the creature itself. Privileged roles left standing are apex animals that reshape the habitat with a single careless step. Now observe the 5 specimens that most often erode this balance. Weak conditional access leaves identity gates half closed, letting risky sessions and legacy flows slip by. Missing or divergent security baselines allow posture to drift. Unsigned code, weak browser settings, lax defender configuration, small deviations that accumulate into exposure. Privileged identity management gaps keep admin rights awake at night, turning dormant privileges into beacons for hunters. Unmanaged BYOD creates shadow corridors at the perimeter where tokens travel without healthy device posture. Reckless update and policy rings send shockwaves through the environment, causing mass lockouts or brittle rollbacks that distract defenders and create fresh openings. The reason this matters now is speed. Exploitation windows shrink to hours. Bot traffic prods APIs constantly. A misscoped exclusion, an untested policy, or a neglected baseline can be noticed and pressed before lunch. Therefore, discipline becomes protection. Start and report only where possible. Validate signals. Enforce in measured rings. Keep admin privileges just in time. Align compliance with the resources that matter most. Before we continue, note the practical lens. Each misconfiguration will end with an implementable countermeasure you can observe, test, and repeat in the Intune Admin Center for immediate visibility and with PowerShell or Graph for clear evidence. Handle this ecosystem with care and it will thrive. Ignore its interdependencies and predators will find their path. Misconfiguration. 1. Weak conditional access policies and fix. Identity gates left ajar. And here we find the identity gate. Standing but not sealed. A policy here is permissive. An exclusion there is generous. The result is a gap so narrow it appears harmless, until a determined creature slips through. Why this matters? Weak conditional access invites quiet calamities. token theft from suspicious sign-ins, legacy authentication that ignores modern checks, and risky sessions that persist long after the danger has passed. Do this poorly, and a single legacy protocol allows basic auth to bypass MFA. Do this well, and risk signals, device posture, and app sensitivity move together, like a well-drilled flock, forcing every request to prove itself. What a resilient design looks like. Start with a streamlined, layered set rather than a thicket of overlapping rules. One policy enforces MFA for all cloud apps except the rare service account that truly cannot handle it. Another requires a compliant device for high-value targets, Exchange Online, SharePoint, and administrative portals. A third reacts to risk, elevate requirements for high sign-in risk, and block when user risk is confirmed. The core idea is simple. Let context stack user, device, app, and risk. Let exclusions be surgical, not sweeping corridors. Now observe the method. In Entra ID, build in report-only mode first, assign to a pilot group, require MFA across the board, and add require device to be marked as compliant for sensitive apps. Watch the insights blade. Which sign-ins would fail? Which flows still use legacy protocols? After 7 to 14 days, correct any false assumptions, then enforce. For global controls, like blocking legacy authentication, communicate and stage via rings to reduce noise. The thing most people miss is exclusions, a trusted executives group, a broad office location, a wildcard app. These carve private trails that no one revisits, and soon the entire herd is using them. Keep 2 break-glass accounts, cloud-only, long random passphrases, no MFA, stored offline. Everything else earns access. Document every exclusion with an owner, a reason, and an expiry. Review monthly. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Exclusions expand over time unless they are pruned. Let me show you exactly how to validate coverage. In the Admin Center, open Conditional Access, then Insights and Reporting. Filter by failure reason and by policy. You'll see who would be blocked by compliant device requirements and who still sails through. Then, with remarkable precision, corroborate it with PowerShell or Graph. List all policies, their states, assignments, and excluded principals. Flag policies in report only for more than 2 weeks. Surface any tenant-wide allow rules without risk checks. Export to a digest your stakeholders can read. A brief anonymized disturbance illustrates the cost. A non-compliant laptop, unmanaged and behind on patches, authenticates with a legacy protocol to an Exchange endpoint. MFA never fires because basic auth ignores it. The attacker harvests credentials via spraying, then replays them, obtains session tokens, and begins mail discovery. It lasts minutes, but that's enough to forward sensitive mail externally. The door was not open, merely unlatched. Common mistakes are predictable. Stacking overlapping policies that contradict each other. Forgetting service principles and automation accounts that need alternative paths. Skipping report-only observation and going straight to block, locking out support and forcing frantic rollbacks. Or trusting named locations without device posture, assuming the office network is a sanctuary. It isn't. Treat every sign-in as untrusted until proven otherwise. A practical build pattern helps. Use Microsoft's recommended baseline templates as your starting posture. Create modular policies by scenario, user risk elevation, device state enforcement, sensitive app access, admin portal hardening, and emergency break glass containment. Name them clearly. Assign them to ring groups, pilot, early adopter, broad, so enforcement steps forward in rhythm with feedback. Here's the quick win you can execute today. Create a conditional access test policy in report only that targets a pilot group. Include Exchange Online and SharePoint Online. Grant access only if both MFA is satisfied and the device is marked compliant. Add a separate policy that blocks legacy authentication across the tenant, but also set it to report only for one ring and monitor which clients attempt those flows. In 7 days, enforce both. First on pilot, then early adopter, then production. Once the gates are right-sized, the herd stays tighter, but posture still drifts without a baseline, and drift invites new paths. Misconfiguration 2. Missing or divergent security baselines and fix. Posture drift in the wild. Now, observe the quiet drift. Devices that looked healthy yesterday begin to wander. A browser lowers its shields. Defender relaxes a setting. Unsigned code slips past a gate that no one remembers opening. Posture drift is rarely loud. It accumulates, and then at an inconvenient hour, it bites. Why this matters? Without security baselines, you don't have gravity. Each team, each image, each exception nudges configuration in a different direction. The consequence is uneven armor. One device blocks script abuse while its neighbor runs anything. One workstation enforces smart screen while another treats the web as a friendly meadow. Attackers prize this inconsistency. They probe for the softest bark in the grove, then move laterally under its cover. Baselines reintroduce order. They set the species standard, Windows, Edge, Defender, so every creature in the habitat follows the same survival ritual. What a disciplined approach looks like. Start with Microsoft's security baselines rather than crafting a forest of custom profiles. Apply Windows, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, and Microsoft Edge baselines as your foundation. Then layer exceptions sparingly. Each deviation should have a reason, an owner, and an expiry date. Catalog these variances. The thing most people miss is that temporary exceptions become permanent features unless they're tracked. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Defaults first, exceptions last, documentation always. How to implement without startling the herd. In the Intune Admin Center, open endpoint security, then security baselines. Review the Windows, Edge, and Defender templates. Use the comparison view to see differences between the baseline and your current policies. Assign the baseline to a pilot ring first. Watch the reports for conflicts and setting failures. Resolve collisions with older MDM profiles or group policy remnants. A common tangle when habitats overlap. Once the pilot settles, move to early adopters, then production. Keep the cadence predictable and the feedback loop tight. Then, with remarkable precision, align compliance policies to your baseline. Mark key baseline settings as compliance requirements where appropriate, so conditional access can require device to be marked compliant with real meaning. This is the interlock most environments skip. A compliant device should reflect baseline truth, not a watered-down checklist. Let me show you the verification ritual. In the Admin Center, open reports for baselines and examine per setting status. Succeeded, error, conflict. Sort by conflict to find where posture diverges. Now corroborate with PowerShell or Graph. Export baseline profiles, assignments, and per setting results. Enumerate scope tags to confirm the right handlers own the right regions. List devices with baseline conflicts and map them to their ring groups. This turns rumors into evidence. Evidence invites precise correction. Common mistakes appear again and again. Rebuilding controls from scratch instead of adopting baselines, leading to gaps you won't discover until an audit. Mixing MDM and GPO without reconciliation, so devices receive contradictory instructions and settle on the least secure outcome. Ignoring report status, assuming assignment equals enforcement, or scattering dozens of small configuration profiles that overlap, making troubleshooting a thicket. A brief, anonymized disturbance. A team disables a Defender attack surface reduction rule to accommodate a legacy tool. No owner, no expiry. Weeks later, a macro-born payload runs unchallenged on those workstations. Defender elsewhere would have contained it. Here, the absence of baseline discipline became the opening. Here's your quick win. Assign the Windows security baseline to your pilot ring today. Resolve conflicts until posture is clean. Then align a compliance policy to those critical settings and link it to conditional access for sensitive apps. Once posture is set, privileges must not linger. Otherwise, the alpha roles reshape the habitat. Misconfiguration 3, PM gaps and standing admin access and fix, privileges that never sleep. Now, observe the apex roles. Global admin, Intune service administrator, powerful creatures. When they roam freely, day and night, the entire habitat bends around them. Privileges that never sleep do not just increase risk, they broadcast it. Why this matters? Standing admin access turns a single compromised session into a governance event. An unattended browser with a valid token. A phishing prompt accepted during a hurried morning. A stale temporary assignment that became permanent. With always-on roles, any breach inherits authority, moves quickly, and leaves a long shadow. With just-in-time activation, the habitat tightens. Access appears only when called, under watch, and fades before predators arrive. What a healthy posture looks like. Privileged identity management places roles in an eligible state. Administrators activate when needed, prove themselves with MFA, explain their reason, request approval where appropriate, and accept a time-bound window. Every activation is logged, a clear trail through the undergrowth. Conditional access steps in, too. Activations occur only from compliant devices. The ritual matters, it slows the moment and demands proof. Let me show you the path. In the Entra Admin Center, open PM. For directory roles, locate Global Administrator, Privileged Role Administrator, and Intune Service Administrator. Convert active assignments to eligible. Configure activation requirements. MFA enforced. Justification mandatory. Approval for the highest risk roles. Set durations. 2 to 4 hours is often sufficient, and require ticket references if your governance demands it. Then, with remarkable precision, create a conditional access policy scoped to privileged role activations, requiring compliant devices and strong authentication. This binds identity, device, and purpose into one motion. The thing most people miss is the break glass pair. 2 cloud-only accounts. Long random passphrases stored offline in a sealed, audited location, excluded carefully from conditional access to survive severe outages, but observed relentlessly. Sign-in logs are their heartbeat. If these accounts stir when there is no declared emergency, treat it as an ecosystem alarm. Now, observe the verification ritual. In PIM's audit history, review activations over the last 30 days. Who activates most? Which reasons repeat? Any activations outside business hours without a changed ticket? Then corroborate with PowerShell or Graph. List all role assignments, separate eligible from active, flag any standing permissions that exceed policy, and export a digest. Send it to stakeholders monthly. Evidence discourages casual exceptions. A brief, anonymized disturbance. An admin signed in on a personal laptop to check a setting after hours. The session lingered. Hours later, an info stealer harvested the token. Because PIM enforced time-bound access, the token's reach expired before it could be reused for elevation. Investigation showed a narrow window of read-only drift and no permanent change. Without PIM, that same token would have commanded the herd. Common mistakes repeat. Granting permanent access just for the project and forgetting the sunset, allowing approvals to route to the same individuals who seek the access, nullifying oversight, failing to configure notifications so no one observes spikes in activation, or neglecting the conditional access tie-in, letting activations occur from unmanaged, unhealthy devices. Here's the quick win you can execute today. Select one high-impact role. Intune Service Administrator is a fine specimen. And convert all active assignments to eligible. Enforce MFA, require justification, and add approval from a security lead. Create the conditional access control for privileged role activation from compliant devices. Demonstrate the workflow to your admins, gather feedback, and then expand to the remaining Apex roles. Once the Apex is tamed, the habitat steadies. But at the perimeter, elusive creatures still slip in, personal devices carrying tokens through unguarded corridors. Misconfiguration. 4. Unmanaged BYOD and device compliance gaps. And fix. Shadow creatures at the perimeter. Ah yes, the shadow at the edge. Personal phones, home laptops, and transient tablets. Useful, prolific, and, if ungoverned, perfectly suited to ferry data without posture. They move quickly, sync silently, and blur the boundary between meadow and preserve. Why this matters? Unmanaged BYOD devices often hold valid tokens. They authenticate through approved apps, then drift out of view without compliance checks or application protection. Data travels unencrypted, Tokens persist beyond updates, and legacy protocols exploit the gap where MFA never fires. Attackers favor these edges. They don't need to storm the fortress if a trusted courier walks the gate each morning. What a balanced approach looks like. Classify access by sensitivity. For high-value apps, Exchange Online, SharePoint, Power BI, admin portals require either a compliant device or, where full enrollment isn't feasible, enforce app protection policies via approved client apps. The choice is not binary. You can insist on full MDM for corporate devices and apply mobile application management for personal ones. The key is to bind data to healthy containers, manage channels, and revocable tokens. Let me show you the practical map. In conditional access, build two complementary policies. One requires device to be marked as compliant for sensitive apps assigned to corporate users and devices. The other requires approved client app and app protection policy for the same apps assigned to BYOD users. Block legacy authentication outright. Then, with remarkable precision, define Intune compliance policies, minimum OS versions, encryption, secure boot, jailbreak/root detection, and defender health where applicable. Align compliance signals so require compliant device means something measurable, not a polite suggestion. The shortcut many miss is app protection for unmanaged devices. If full enrollment is politically or technically difficult, enforce MAM. Require the Outlook, OneDrive, and Teams clients. Enable data protection, PIN and conditional launch, block save to personal locations, and wipe app data upon sign-out or device inactivity. It's not as complete as MDM, but it creates a safe corridor rather than a dark alley. Observe the verification ritual. In the Intune Admin Center, open devices, then compliance. Filter for non-compliant and unassigned. Sort by platform. Which devices access Exchange Online without passing compliance? In sign-in logs, add columns for conditional access, result, and legacy authentication. Identify attempted connections via basic auth in clients that fail the approved app requirement. Then corroborate with PowerShell or Graph. Enumerate devices with compliance status. List users accessing sensitive apps from non-compliant endpoints, and summarize legacy protocol usage. Convert this into a weekly perimeter report, a brief anonymized disturbance, a contractor's unmanaged laptop connected via an old mail client. Basic auth let the session proceed without MFA. After a minor spray, credentials were replayed and a token issued. The attacker created an inbox rule that quietly forwarded specific project mail externally. It lasted a day before anyone noticed the odd recipients. Require approved client app would have refused the courier. Block legacy auth would have silenced the root entirely. Common mistakes hide in plain sight. Blanket exclusions for executives, meant to reduce friction, become unmonitored highways. Ignoring macOS and mobile platforms because the last incident came from Windows. Inconsistent app protection scopes that cover Outlook but miss OneDrive, leaving files to wander. Or treating compliant device as a global mandate without a clear compliance policy, producing false confidence. Here's the quick win you can execute today. Deploy a minimal compliance policy to a BYOD pilot, encryption required, OS version floor, and jailbreak root detection. Pair it with app protection policies for Outlook, OneDrive, and Teams. Block save to personal storage and require PIN with biometrics. In conditional access, set require approved client app for Exchange Online and SharePoint for that pilot group. Monitor access denials and remediation. Within a week, you'll see where the shadows congregate and how quickly they adapt when the path is lit. Misconfiguration. 5. Reckless update and policy rings. And fix. Changes without a safe migration path. Now observe the migration season. Updates, new baselines, fresh apps. When changes surge across the habitat all at once, even healthy creatures panic. A global push creates a habitat-wide disturbance, lockouts, performance dips, brittle rollbacks. Defenders turn inward to firefight, and predators sense the distraction. Why this matters: without rings, every change is a bet on perfection. A single misscoped assignment can deny access to mail, break VPN clients, or collide with older profiles. Confidence collapses. With disciplined rings, impact is contained, feedback is swift, and rollback is graceful. What a stable path looks like. 3 rings: pilot, early adopter, broad. The cadence is predictable. Days for pilot, 3-7 for early adopters, 7-14 for production. Use the same ring groups for apps, policies, baselines, and conditional access enforcement steps. Universal ring sets reduce variance and cognitive load. Then, with remarkable precision, stage enforcement. Report only first for conditional access, then enforce on pilot, then step forward. Let me show you the build. In Entra, create 3 security groups: ring pilot, ring early, ring broad. Populate pilot with IT and power users who will provide crisp feedback. In Intune, assign Windows update rings and feature updates with deferrals matching cadence. Assign baselines and configuration profiles to pilot first. Watch conflicts. For apps, deploy to pilot with deadline, then expand. For conditional access, keep report only on early rings while enforcement lands in pilot. Verification prevents surprises. In reports, check assignment overlaps and policy conflicts by ring. Confirm deferral and deadline consistency. If a pilot issue appears, pause the ripple, fix, retest, then proceed. Upset this balance, and chaos spreads swiftly. A brief anonymized disturbance. An organization pushed a new VPN client globally at noon. The client required a registry key delivered by a configuration profile that lagged by hours. Users lost network access, conditional access flagged risky sessions, and emergency exclusions were added in haste. With rings, this would have been a small ripple, not a wave. Quick win. Establish a 1% to 9%, 90% structure today. Route this week's baseline or CA enforcement through ring pilot first, collect telemetry for 72 hours, then proceed. Field audit, admin center and PowerShell. Verify, don't assume. Observe closely now. The verification ritual. First the admin center pass, open conditional access, then insights and reporting. Confirm policy coverage, risky sign-ins, legacy authentication attempts, and which users would fail compliant device checks. Move to endpoint security baselines. Review per setting status and conflicts. Inspect devices. Compliance. Focus on non-compliant counts and drift by platform. In PIM, review activation history, durations, and approvals. Finally, updates. Confirm ring deferrals and deployment status. Then corroborate with Graph or PowerShell. Export conditional access policies, states, assignments, and exclusions. Flag report only older than 14 days. Enumerate baseline profiles and setting conflicts. Map to scope tags and rings. List role assignments. Active versus eligible, and highlight standing access. Report devices accessing Exchange or SharePoint while non-compliant. Summarize legacy protocol usage. Validate ring group memberships and overlapping assignments. The reason this works is simple. Visibility turns rumors into evidence. Evidence invites precise correction. Common pitfall. Auditing without scoping by app sensitivity and role. Focus where impact concentrates. Exchange, SharePoint, admin portals, and Apex roles. Quick win. Schedule this audit weekly. Produce a 1-page risk digest with top 3 findings, owners, and due dates. The key takeaway. Balance this ecosystem with 5 disciplined controls. Sealed identity gates, enforced baselines, just-in-time privileges, guarded BYOD corridors, and careful rings that absorb shock. If this helped steady your habitat, continue to observe this ecosystem with care. Subscribe to catch the next migration. Advanced conditional access design and automated graph audits, and watch the field checks become a calm, repeatable ritual. A truly magnificent specimen, handled with care.